Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Daily Gwei Refuel, where I recap the latest news in the Ethereum ecosystem. I'm your host, Anthony Sassano, and today's the 31st of July, 2023. Alright everyone, let's get into it. So yesterday, the 30th of July, was Ethereum's 8th birthday. So 8 years since the Ethereum chain had its genesis on July 30th, 2015. Of course, Ethereum had been around for a little while. Before that, they had the ICO in mid-2014, and then it was talked about as early as late 2013 by Vitalik, and obviously publishing the white paper around then for Ethereum. But 8 years, wow, that's gone by pretty quick. I haven't been around for the whole 8 years. I actually thought about this yesterday. I thought when I got into Ethereum in early 2017, it wasn't even 2 years old yet. And I felt like at the time that I had missed so much, right? Because the DAO had happened, the ICO had already happened, and the price had already gone pretty bonkers by then, I guess, from what it was to when I first discovered it. I think, if you look at what it opened at, it was around 30, well, what was sold at the ICO was around 30 cents. And then it stayed at that, and it stayed at like $1 to $10 for a little while there. It spiked, obviously, because of the DAO, but generally, when I got into it and bought my first bit of ETH, I was like, wow, okay, I've missed the boat here. And then, of course, ETH went up a lot in 2017, and I also felt like I missed the boat because I didn't have enough money to buy as much ETH as I wanted, and that bear market, the 2018-2019 bear market, really helped me with that, which I'm thankful for, of course, and that's why I always say that you should be thankful for bear markets for various different reasons there. But yeah, I mean, I've been around in Ethereum for over 6 years now, which is quite kind of wild when I think about it, right? Like, I started off just being into the technology because I figured it was, I thought it was much cooler than Bitcoin because I had been around in Bitcoin in 2013, 2014, kind of got over it because, Bitcoin's cool and all, and the store of value use case, digital gold use case is cool and all. And at the time, payments were still being talked about and things like that. But obviously, I like Ethereum for a lot of other reasons. I'm a technologist at heart. I like Ethereum mainly because you can build whatever you want on it, but also because of things like proof of stake, right? It's distinctly different from Bitcoin and stuff like that. But yeah, happy birthday to Ethereum for yesterday. You can see this picture here from Taken's theorem, this graphic that basically shows the ICO on the left. So summer or mid 2014, you can see that's the Bitcoin address that people sent BTC to, and they were promised, some ETH at a later date, and then Genesis happened a year later, and you can see that little bridge there. So all the ETH going into the BTC contract that was controlled by the Ethereum Foundation, and then the ETH being, all the BTC going into that address that was controlled by the Ethereum Foundation, and then all the ETH coming out of that at Genesis, and now it's gone crazy since then. It's kind of like a big bang, right? Where essentially we had the big bang of Ethereum when Genesis happened, and it's just a really cool way to visualize that. So thank you to Taken's theorem for that. But yeah, again, happy birthday to Ethereum. I'm going to move on from that to something that happened on Ethereum's birthday that is not positive, unfortunately. So there was an exploit on a number of Curve Finance stable pools that was due to a compiler bug with the Viper language compiler here. Now, I got a lot of takes on this, few technical ones, few non-technical ones. I'm going to go in a bunch of different directions here. But TLDR, the summary, as I said, was that the stable pools like AL ETH, MS ETH, P ETH were vulnerable. They were kind of drained by a mixture of people. So there was the black hats, the actual kind of hackers, so to speak, or the bad guys, so to speak, that drained these pools. Then there were the white hats who basically exploited protocols that they knew were vulnerable before the black hats could do it, before the bad guys could do it, and white hats are usually the good guys who will exploit something, but then they'll return the funds. They're not just going to keep the funds for themselves. Then there were the MEV bots that were set up to front run certain transactions, as they normally are on chain. And they basically accidentally front ran some of these exploits, and then some of them, I believe, returned the funds to their rightful owners. Now, there was a big discussion around this actually about kind of like these MEV bots, and Eric Connor, my good friend here, had a tweet about this where he said, today has produced some of the largest MEV reward blocks in Ethereum's history. And he highlighted a bunch of blocks here. There was a 584 ETH block reward, MEV payment made. There was a 345 ETH payment made, 247 ETH payment, which I believe went to the Rocket Pool smoothing pool, and a 51 ETH payment. Now, the reason why people in the MEV Boost network were willing to pay this to get to win the block basically is because they were exploiting things. So if you're exploiting thousands, if not tens of thousands of ETH, and you want to guarantee that your exploit or your transaction doing the exploit is the one to get in, the first one to get in, then you're going to pay a lot for that privilege, right? And that's exactly what we've seen here. And then this started a discussion around kind of the morality of this. Should the people who got these block rewards return them, because technically these funds are actually the proceeds of a crime, right? Proceeds of the hackers basically using these funds in order to exploit. And it is like a moral kind of gray area, right? Where it's like, some people on one side who say, no, it shouldn't be returned. This is just the way the protocol is. This is the way the Ethereum network is because it's credibly neutral, decentralized, all that stuff that I've spoken about in the past. And then you have other people who say, well, it's the morally right thing to do. Forget about the legality of it because as I said, it is a legal gray area. Did I say that? No, I think it said moral gray area, but it is also a legal gray area because there is definitely no legislation when it comes to MEV, as far as I know, in any country around the world. So really, you could kind of wait around and find out and see if a nation state would pursue you for this, right? Will pursue you as a validator that proposed this block and that didn't give the funds back. It's highly unlikely, but it could happen, right? I'm not sure what they would go after you with, but as far as I know, there are no laws that exist that specify that if you receive money from proceeds of, I guess, like an exploit on chain, you have to return that money, or else you can be charged with something. I know there are existing laws for other things like receiving money from that is earned via proceeds of a crime, and even if you didn't know that they came from proceeds of a crime, it can still be kind of taken from you and clawed back from you. But in this instance, you probably do know, right? Like if you look on chain, you can actually kind of trace this stuff back. So it's a gray area there. But morally, at least because morals are so subjective, it's very hard to know where people stand on these things unless they tell you, right? I can tell you where I would stand on it. If I got a block like this and I could objectively trace the funds back to the fact that it was exploited and it was stolen money and it should be returned, I would return it. Because at the end of the day, right, returning 584 ETH, the block reward here, it cost me nothing to do that. Like I included the block, right? I proposed the block because it was just my turn to propose the block, right? I got lucky basically. So it cost me nothing to return that money. But in my mind, it is a morally good thing to do. But at the end of the day, when we're designing networks like crypto networks, for example, we shouldn't rely on morals because people have different morals to each other. We're not trying to rely on altruism or rely on goodwill or anything for the security of the chain, for the working of the chain. And that's why so many people are working on eliminating a lot of this toxic MEV, a lot of this stuff that happens. But it is a really hard problem because some people, as I said, because it's a moral thing, some people will say, no, it's totally fine for the validator to keep these rewards because it's not their fault that the money came from the proceeds of an exploit. All they were doing was their job, right? The validator was literally just doing its job. It's hands off as well. It's not like I would go out there and be able to manipulate this. There are some ways to manipulate it so that you can propose a block, but it's very, very difficult to do, and you have to have a lot of validators, and it's not even worth it for you to do it in that sense. If you have a lot of validators, then there's no point because you're earning a lot of money anyway, right? But generally, there's nothing I could do. If I proposed this block, it was random. It was literally just my turn to propose a block, and I proposed it, and I got lucky here. So you could make the argument that it is not the proposer's fault that this happened, and they shouldn't be under any moral or legal obligation to return these funds. Now, legal is a different thing. Moral obligation, I said, is subjective. Legally, it's very different because if there is a law one day that states that you have to, if you win one of these blocks and it can be traced back objectively that this reward came from the proceeds of an on-chain exploit, that legally you are required, depending on the jurisdiction, of course, but you are required to return these funds to the affected parties. And that's, again, up to the law to decide on that and up to courts and things like that. But morally, it depends on the person, of course. And as I said, for me personally, I would return it. But again, I don't expect everyone to feel the same way as me, and I don't think it's right or wrong either. I don't think I'm automatically right for returning it, and I don't think people are automatically wrong for not returning it. It is a gray area. It is very subjective, and it is a discussion I think that will be ongoing for many years to come here. But yeah, just an unfortunate I guess, like unfortunate day overall in DeFi with these exploits happening on Curve, because Curve is considered one of those, I guess, like blue chip DeFi protocols, one of those older DeFi protocols. But it does speak to what I've talked about a lot about on the refill before, where I've said that even the older protocols out there can still have bugs in them and exploits in them for things that are very esoteric, like I mentioned, and Senior Doggo here, one of the contributors to the Viper language, said that a compiler bug or an exploit in a compiler, or a 0-day in a compiler, is very hard to kind of like pick for, because usually the audits are not done on the compiler, they're done on the code. So the way it works is essentially the compiler compiles the code, and you would audit the code, and you wouldn't, and there are audits done on the compilers, but the compilers are looked at a lot less than the code that's built on top, or the code that's built and then compiled, and that's why this wasn't caught, and that's why essentially this was this happened at the compiler level, and that's why it affected multiple different things here because of that. Now, as far as I know, this has been patched and everything, but imagine if you have like a contract that is decentralized, right, and that has no way to upgrade the contract, and there's no admin keys or anything like that. Well, then that's exploitable forever, basically. There's no way to change that. People would have to just withdraw their funds, and the contract will have to be redeployed with the fix. You couldn't fix the existing contract. And that's why there's a fine line between kind of immutable, decentralized contracts and upgradable ones. And that's why a lot of projects opt to have a centralized control over this in case of these bugs, especially early on in a project's life cycle. But if you want to learn more about this, about the specifics of the compiler stuff, and you can read this tweet thread from Senior Doggo here, who goes into a bit more detail and also gives a general overview of that kind of area there. But it's beyond my depth of knowledge, of course, because I'm not a developer here. And the Viper language Twitter account also put out an update here about which versions are vulnerable to these attacks as well, which you can check out there. Now, of course, these attacks had some contagion within the DeFi ecosystem here. And I woke up this morning and I said, I slept through the entire DeFi Red Wedding, as I was calling it. For anyone who's watched Game of Thrones, you know what the Red Wedding is. And then someone commented and kind of came at me and say, you didn't thank Chainlink for saving DeFi. And I'm like, dude, what are you on about? Like, I literally, at the time, I had woken up, it'd been 2 hours, I just made breakfast and had my coffee, I was just catching up on everything. Like, I had no idea that, what had happened. So how was I supposed to thank Chainlink? And then Mike here from Sylph who's pretty active in the Daily Gwei Discord channel as well, basically gave me the summary, is that TLDR, the on-chain prices dropped low enough to liquidate large positions, but prices on centralized exchanges stayed above. Chainlink uses both sources, so the reported values kept them alive. So, yeah, I mean, when it comes to oracles, Chainlink is the gold standard. I mean, I think that should be obvious to anyone at this point. They have been around for a very long time. They are the backbone of DeFi, and they don't just kind of like use one centralized price feed, right? They use a multitude of different price feeds and kind of aggregate them together in order to spit out a very accurate and very resilient price feed for different assets. Because at the end of the day, if you literally have an oracle that's only looking at one or even two markets, someone could potentially manipulate those markets in order to manipulate the oracle price, and it has happened before in order to affect or have some effect on some market outcome, or some DeFi outcome, or some liquidation, whatever else it is, right? And then on top of that, when it comes to these exploits, we can see asset price movements happen very quickly, even if it's not the fault of a manipulation or anything like that. We can still see these price movements happen very quickly because of the exploit itself. So yeah, once again, Chainlink comes to the rescue, which is very awesome to see, of course. But yeah, I didn't know that at the time, so I was a bit annoyed when someone came at me with that. And on that note as well, I do want to just quickly say something about this too. I put out a tweet over the weekend, I think it was, where I said that I'm kind of sick of people doing this guilt by association thing, where essentially you have the Ethereum community as this monolith, basically. You have everyone in the Ethereum community, and people look at it as a monolith, look at it as a hive mind, when it isn't. You have some people who say one thing and focus on some other things. You have some people that focus on other things, and you have people that have different opinions. But what people tend to do is that they take an opinion of someone. For example, I get this a lot, actually. People will take an opinion that Bankless has, that David and Ryan have, and then they'll kind of think that I have the same opinion as them. And if it's an opinion that they don't disagree, that they disagree with, or that they don't agree with from David and Ryan's perspective, they'll kind of imprint that on me and say, oh, well, Anthony must think of the same thing. It's like, no, that's not how it works. And it's not obviously exclusive to crypto. People do this all the time with different various things, but I don't think we should be judging people as a collective, as a hive mind. You should judge people based on their own opinions. And when it comes to something like Chainlink, I have always been very favorable towards Chainlink. I talk about them all the time, right? I talked about CCIP last week a couple of times on there, and I was very favorable about it, and I'm very excited about it. I think it's a really cool, innovative piece of technology that Chainlink has brought to the crypto ecosystem, and I've always been favorable towards them. But I think that a lot of the times, if you aren't paying attention to what I'm saying, or kind of like the show and what I'm doing, you'll do that guilt by association, which I honestly, I'm sick of at this point. It really annoys me, and it's kind of like begun to get to me to a point where I just have been thinking about not posting anything on Twitter anymore and just not being involved on there, because if all that's going to happen is people are going to say that I have an opinion just because someone else has an opinion and they've just imprinted that on me, it's not something that I want to be around. But thankfully, the conversation I had here with Brian, the person that brought this up originally, kind of simmered out, and people kind of came to my defense and said, yes, he has talked about it. But yeah, I think just generally doing guilt by association is not healthy. It's not something that we should be rooting for in this space, supporting in this space. We should be calling it out where we see it. And as I said, I'm a huge fan of Chainlink, always have been. I think they're doing amazing stuff in the Oracle space. And, I've gone on in the past about things like how I said that I think that Oracle-less protocols are really cool, and I do. But I can think that Oracle-less protocols are really cool, and I can still think Chainlink is cool, because at the end of the day, there are plenty of things that are going to require oracles that you can't get around. Just as a random example, real-world assets, right? Assets that exist extra protocol. So real estate, for example, commodities. These things cannot be issued natively on chain. You have to have a tether from the off-chain world to the on-chain world, and they're just some of the examples here. And Chainlink goes beyond price oracles, of course. CCIP is a cross-chain messaging protocol. It's trying to do more than just kind of like oracles and bridging. It's trying to do cross-chain messaging, which I've talked about a lot in the past as well. So when it comes to these sorts of things, you got to look at the nuance. You got to break it down. You got to look at everything. And I know that some people have like a bias against Chainlink because of the Link Marines. At the end of the day, guys, every community has their rabid members, and I think that depending on what the price action is doing, they're going to be more rabid than other times, right? Obviously, if the price of an asset is going up a lot, you're going to get these people on Twitter especially, they're going to be like in your comments shilling things, and I get that can be annoying, and I totally understand that, but there are a lot of genuine people in each of these communities, even if the token is going up or down, and of course, if the token's going down, communities' mood can sour, and I totally get that. I mean, I feel that. I felt that in 2018 and 2019 with ETH. ETH was going down relentlessly, and the mood soured, right? But that's just what happens with a lot of tokens, a lot of projects out there. And just as a recent example, I saw it happen a little bit with Rocket Pool. The RPL token went up a lot, and then it went down a lot. It's basically down, I guess, from what it go to, like $60 or something recently, and then it went down to about 30. I felt a bit of a shift in the community there where it got a little bit more toxic. Thankfully, the Rocket Pool community is generally pretty good, so I didn't notice it too much, but I did notice a shift there. And I don't blame people for that. I totally understand that. It's a human nature thing. But at the end of the day, I think, we need to separate that kind of behavior from the actual technology, and that's how we get to the truth and how we get to actually focus on the right things. Anyway, done on that little thing there. I think that was the last thing, about that kind of exploit there and what happens. But yeah, as I always say, don't literally put all of your money into anything, really. Honestly, at the end of the day, even like things like ETH staking, even though I believe solo staking has basically a 0% risk, and I say that in the sense of, unless you're actively trying to screw up, like attack the chain, for example, or trying to double sign, it's very hard for you to lose a substantial amount of money. Even if you are offline for a while, you're not going to get slashed, right? You're going to inactivity leak, and there is a limit to how much that can happen there. And even if you get slashed on your own, like even if you double sign, I think the penalty is like 1/8 of your 32 ETH. So relative to 32 ETH, that's not much, right? So, but like a lot of other things out there have different risk profiles. Different staking protocols have different risk profiles. Different DeFi protocols have different ones. And if you're putting like 100% of your net worth into these things and it gets exploited and there's no way for you to get your funds back, well, yeah, that's obviously not very fun. So yeah. Anyway, moving on from that, there's a tweet thread here from Light Client. So I spoke about the new EIP 7377 last week, and Light Client said there's been lots of feedback since he proposed the EIP, and he's got some takeaways here in this thread. So if you want to learn more about that, I see some of the takeaways, see some of the feedback that was given. You can read this. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. I'm going to try and get through these other things pretty fast here because I realize I'm already at the 20-minute mark. So we got a new dashboard here from Ericsson.eth. So this dashboard basically is a hypothetical dashboard that tracks how much MEV or how much ETH would be burned if we implemented the MEV-burn upgrade to the Ethereum network. Now, I've talked about MEV-burn before. It is a proposal to basically burn the MEV instead of paying it out to validators. Well, we would burn a lot more ETH if this was happening here. You can see on this chart that the blue represents without MEV burn, so how much ETH has been burned since July 1st without MEV burn, and then the red, or I guess like the orange, shows what it would be like with MEV burn, or what the supply would look like, I guess. So the total supply without MEV burn would have gone down. I don't know if there's any kind of like numbers here because I'm just eyeing the chart, but basically it would have gone down, the total supply would have gone down by, let me just eye the chart, I think it's around 50,000 or something, just without MEV burn, or even less than that actually. The chart's kind of confusing. Yeah, it's about 25,000, I guess, or something like that, just eyeing it. But with MEV burn, it would have gone down by like 50,000. So obviously double, let's just say double. So you'd have double the amount of ETH being burned with MEV burn. And as you can see, there was this massive spike here because of the recent exploit and all the on-chain activity that happened because of that. But generally, that's what it would kind of look like. So you can go check out this dashboard for yourself. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. We don't know if MEV burn is going to go into the network or not. As I've said before, there is still a bunch of controversy around it. There is still a bunch of people that on both sides of the aisle, some people want it, some people don't. Some people like that we get those kind of lottery blocks that go to validators instead of it just being burned. But really, MEV burn, all it does is it redirects that. It redirects the MEV from the validators to all ETH holders, just like EIP 1559 or the fee burn in general redirects fees from, at the time, miners, but now stakers and validators to all ETH holders. And yeah, I mean, I think that it's a positive thing that happens. But I understand from the point of view of like validators, it's like a pay cut to them, right? I guess like maybe a short-term pay cut for long-term benefit. But yeah, there is definitely a bunch of controversy around that. But you can go check out this dashboard. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. All right, I've spoken about Octant recently, and this is the group that was staking a bunch of the Golem Foundation's ETH here. So they've got a little thread here going into a bit more detail about how they're doing this. So they said, we're solo staking 100,000 ETH using a Geth Nimbus client pairing on hardened Cubase OS boxes, which ensure enhanced security through Linux network stack isolation. They're considering replacing Geth with Nevermind for improved client diversity and possibly operating different client pairs simultaneously. We monitor our operation using tools such as Prometheus, Grafana, and Beacon Chain. To increase reliability, we plan to distribute our validators across multiple machines. We've explored advanced staking methods like this DBT technology, but for now, we're sticking with our current approach due to its simplicity and lower risk profile. So it seems like they're really going all in on the solo staker, like trying to be a real solo staker with a large amount of ETH, right? 100,000 ETH here, which is great to see. And I'm grateful that they're thinking about swapping from Geth to Nethermind, because obviously Geth is still the majority client, so we would love these bigger stakers to switch as well, but they're already using a minority consensus layer client here in Nimbus, so that's very cool as well to see. But yeah, I've discussed Octant before, so I'm not going to rehash that there. Just wanted to point out this little thread. Exciting news out of the Ethereum attestation service ecosystem. So EAS is now natively integrated into the OP stack. So this means that all future OP stack chains deployed will automatically include the EAS contracts at Genesis. This is what's really cool about these kind of modular kind of SDK or development stacks for these L2s. Basically, what they get is out-of-the-box plugins, essentially. So you can think of EAS as a plugin on within the OP stack, and they're not the only one. There's a bunch of other ones as well. That any chain that gets kind of like spun up using the OP stack can automatically deploy and inherit these things on their own. On their own OP stack chain. So Base, for example, would inherit all of this. Avo, Zora, there's a few others out there now that are using OP stack that automatically inherit all of this infrastructure. And this just further makes the case for these things, spinning up as L2s rather than an L1. Because when you spin up a new L1, you have to deploy all this infrastructure yourself, right? There's no out-of-the-box kind of tooling for this. And then you also have to get the infrastructure support, the infrastructure companies to support this sorts of stuff. Whereas if the infrastructure companies only have to support one development stack, such as OP stack, or a few different ones like OP stack, and obviously some of the other L2 teams are also doing stacks like this, it becomes a lot easier, it becomes a lot more scalable, it becomes a lot less overhead for these teams. So it's great to see that playing out there. So just great to see EAS integrated here natively with OP stack. All right, so Vance Spencer put out an interesting tweet thread about DeFi over the weekend. He said, important to internalize, blue chip DeFi or anything was a meme last cycle. Nobody was generating sustainable cash flow, and to be honest, the industry was a shit show. Launching a successful protocol and 15 VC funded forks would come in with with tokens and vampire attack you. This cycle is different. Real sustainable cash flows with paths to scale, large markets, all competitors now dead or thoroughly discouraged, no VC money to fund second, third, fourth, or fifth place, consolidation, blue chippery. We've figured out where aggregation points are and who the long-term incumbents will be in DeFi. We've figured out some protocols and features are likely to be featured, to be rolled into larger incumbents. If you squint a little bit, you can see the FANG of DeFi assembling. FANG being like the stock market, like Facebook and Apple and Netflix and Google and Amazon, right? What is dead may never die. It's over. We're back. We've never even left. Maybe it never even happened. So I guess like there are different opinions on what the FANG of DeFi is. I think it's safe to say like Uni and Comp and MKR and Aave and SNX and like all these older DeFi protocols that are still around and gaining kind of market share would be considered the FANG of DeFi here. But it's taken a while for us to get there, right? It's taken a while for us to work through the forks, work through the competitors, consolidate around the mature and long-lasting protocols that essentially are making up the real blue chip DeFi. Because blue chip, as Vance said here, was a meme, right? All these tokens indiscriminately went down because no one really knew who the winners were going to be. There were memes being perpetuated about everything, good and bad memes. But now we do know, Maker is a cash flow machine. Uniswap is a cash flow machine. Yes, they don't have the fee take enabled, but they are completely dominant in the AMM space, right? Aave, very dominant. Compound as well, still very dominant. And these things continue to grow, and they've been around for a while, and they're hardened, they're resilient, and they're more secure, I guess, than the other ones. In saying that, I guess people thought Curve was secure and some of the Curve pools were exploited here. But as I said, that can happen. Doesn't matter how long it's been there. Now, I also had a tweet over the weekend in the, I guess, like similar vein around DeFi where I said, I know the purists among us, especially the Ethereum OGs, are sad that DAI hasn't lived up to its original vision of being a truly decentralized stablecoin. This might be an unpopular opinion, but I believe that Maker has taken the right path in targeting/onboarding real-world assets. I still maintain the belief that a truly decentralized, stable, and scalable fiat-pegged stablecoin is impossible to create and is generally a fool's errand. If Ethereum succeeds in becoming the backbone of the new world financial system, then it is likely that ETH's market cap would be in the tens, if not hundreds of trillions of dollars, and we'd probably stop measuring the market cap in dollars at this point anyway. Ergo, ETH becomes the stablecoin. Now, I've talked about this on the Refuel before, so I'm not going to go over it again, but I really do think that Maker took the right path. If you're interested in still supporting a path of a truly decentralized stablecoin like DAI, you have Liquidity, right? And you have Rye, and you have High, which is like an upgrade or a fork of Rye here. There are other attempts out there. But as I've explained before, I don't think that is going to ever happen. I don't think we're going to get a stablecoin, or a truly decentralized stablecoin that is ever going to be as scalable as a centralized fiat-pegged stablecoin, I should say, for a lot of the reasons I've outlined before. The number one reason is the fact that you're always limited by the collateral. You're always going to be limited by ETH's market cap. And realistically, that's the max limit, that's the ceiling. But in reality, it's much lower than that because most ETH is not going to be used to mint these stablecoins, right? So when you look at it like that, it is basically impossible to create that. And as I said, like if ETH's market cap gets to a point where you can have $1 trillion worth of collateral backing the stablecoin, well, that means ETH is incredibly valuable, and we just stop basically measuring ETH against fiat currencies, and ETH can maybe become the reserve currency of the internet and of the world, and ETH becomes the stablecoin because, as I said before, stability is relative. 1 ETH equals 1 ETH. 1 USD equals 1 USD. USD is strong against other fiat currencies. ETH is strong against other assets within crypto, right? Whether they be currencies or otherwise. ETH is strong against them. Over a long enough time frame, ETH has absolutely smashed fiat currencies, right? So has BTC, to be fair. And if we get to a point where ETH is worth that tens, if not hundreds of trillions of dollars, ETH will become the de facto money of the internet, the de facto money of the world, and we will not use fiat-pegged stablecoins as a means of kind of like money or tracking things. We would be or measuring things against. We would be using ETH as that. I already do that internally. I mean, you guys know that any investments that I make, I kind of benchmark them against ETH as my unit of account here, but also I do check the US dollar price and I check the AUD price. One day we will probably get to a point where you don't do that anymore. Just like I don't check the price of ETH against most fiat currencies. I only check it against AUD because I'm in Australia and I have to know for taxes, but USD is what everyone looks at. No one looks at ETH's price against the peso, for example, or against yen, or against South Korean won, or even the euro is not really mentioned much, right? And when you think about it like that, then you can really start to see the picture come into view of how these things work. All right, so something that came out last week that I forgot to cover was this new wallet. It's not an app, it's a web wallet called Beam that was launched by the Eco project here. So basically, they're calling this an on-chain Venmo, and honestly, they are hitting all the right notes with this. I'm thoroughly impressed with this. So this video basically goes over what exactly they're doing here and how it just works. So as I said, it's a browser wallet. You do not need to download a new wallet. It just has a QR code. People can automatically send you funds by scanning it. You can send funds natively through chat apps. There are no limits, no censorship. It's self-custody. It's built on, I believe, it's deployed on Optimism, and I don't remember the other chain that it's deployed on right now. It's on Optimism and maybe Base, I think. But yeah, I mean, if you keep scrolling through, you can watch the video. I'll link it in the YouTube description below. But yeah, it just hits all the right notes. It hits the notes for mass adoption. There are different things here that make it really easy. You can send it via emails. Yeah, it's on Ethereum and Base. I'm assuming it's going to be on every OP stack supported chain and beyond that. But I was thoroughly impressed by this, honestly. I mean, I used it on my phone, tested it out a bit. It just works, honestly, and it works really, really well. It's very straightforward. It really is closer to that vision of digital cash that we've had in crypto for quite a while now, and I highly recommend you guys checking it out. That's why I wanted to highlight it. So I'll link this in the YouTube description below for you to do so. All right, I know I'm over time here, but I did want to wrap this episode up with a tweet that I put out over the weekend, just expanding on this. I said, I've believed for a while that the real crypto market top was May 2021. The November 2021 top was fueled by the degenerate leverage of players like 3 Arrows Capital and by SBF yeeting customer funds into the void. If the usual crypto cycle repeats, then we can expect the bull market to begin in Q1 2024. I've explained how I've come to these conclusions before on the refuel. I showed you guys the chart with the lines that I've drawn on there and the ranges that we're in. But the more and more I think about this, the more and more I look at this, the more clear the picture becomes to me. Because if you look at all the metrics outside of price for 2021, May definitely looks like the top. Every other metric topped in May except price. And then November just looks like the dead cat bounce that you usually see, except we went to new highs because of that extra push from leverage, from this kind of like customer funds being exploited and put into these sorts of things, especially when it came to some of the trades like the L1 trade. We obviously now know that SBF was putting a lot of customer funds, ETH and BTC and others, into things like Sol, for example, right? So when you kind of look at it like that, I do think that the top was May 2021, which means that we have already been in this bear crab market for over 2 years. And if you look at the chart and you assume that the cycles are going to play out similarly, we can expect a new bull market to start early next year, with all-time highs potentially being hit in the second half of next year, as I've explained before there. But I think on that note, on that bullish note, that's going to be it for today. So thank everyone for listening and watching. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the newsletter, join the Discord channel, and I'll catch you all tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.